Flying back around again.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Shuffle podcast. Today we have here Rebelindustry from Canada. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
So, for the people who don't know you yet, please introduce yourself.
My name is Sabrina. I live in Toronto, Canada. I've been shuffling this is going to be my 7th year of shuffling, which is so crazy. I cannot believe it's been this long. And I guess I represent the Canadian shuffle community here in Canada. I also run a company called Shuffluence with my partner Candice, and we are going to be hosting shuffle events here in Canada and hopefully globally as well. And yeah, I just love everything to do with shuffling. It's my life now. So I guess that's why I'm on this podcast.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Shufflance later. I have here some notes to talk about. And
Nice.
first woman in the podcast. So let's kick this off with how do you see shuffling in women? Because there's a lot of men in shuffling. I don't know in United States or Canada, but in Spain there's more men than women. So how do you see and how do you live this shuffle journey as a woman?
It's so interesting that you asked that for sure, because I feel like a lot of the time too, because I'm a teacher as well, I get a lot of students who come to me, as a fresh dancer, never shuffled before. And a lot of the men that come to me specifically ask me if it's okay for them to be shuffling. And I always have to let them know, actually, shuffling was mostly a male dominated dance form. And in many countries continues to be male dominated. So it's interesting that you asked that. But I think ultimately for my journey specifically, I was surrounded by a lot of men, and it was very interesting to start as well noticing the differences in capability as well for men versus women in shuffling, especially when it comes to harder styles of shuffling, like Cali, for example. But ultimately, it's been really awesome being a female in the shuffling scene and being able to start promoting other women as well to really be able to tackle different styles, as opposed to, a lot of the time we see cutting shapes being the dominated form of shuffling for women. I think ultimately showing the way and paving the way for other women to be able to tackle different styles and be able to execute, the harder styles of shuffling has been really gratifying for me personally. And I've also been surrounded by other women who are very strong female shufflers as well. For example, Solvis. I'm sure a lot of people look up to her for her power and her strength and her shuffling. So I've definitely been surrounded by great females, great strong females, and I think ultimately it's been good. I think we're seeing a lot of shift, especially now with cutting shapes becoming so mainstream.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a lot of shift between, being mostly male dominated to females who are coming into the scene and who are tackling all different styles as opposed to just cutting shapes. So I think it's great. I think that there's a lot of diversity in shuffling.
Yeah, and that's like a really extra point for you because, as you said, most of female now, they choose like the shapes steps which aren't that like with this power, with this high energy, which is more common to see in men. And you started 7 years ago, not just dancing shuffle, but going with the tough styles, which are with the hard style, with the Melbourne, with the Cali. So you're like really you're really a rebel within the shuffle.
I think ultimately the name too speaks for itself. I just truly wanted to represent my style in a unique way. And as soon as I did come into the scene as a cutting shapes dancer, I was inspired heavily by the UK shapes emergence. And I was really inspired by, just the multitude of dancers who were embodying the styles. And here in Canada, I was very lucky to be in a community where there was already such diverse types of shuffling. So I was exposed to Melbourne and Cali styles at a very early stage in my shuffling career, if you want to call it that. And ultimately, that led to me really wanting to dabble in the powerful styles and really making those a part of my shuffling repertoire. So, yeah, it was very early on that I started introducing my style to Melbourne, and then from there to Cali as well. So, yeah.
So, talking about beginnings, how did you discover shuffling? Because 7 years ago, it wasn't a mainstream. Well, it was known because it had a YouTube boom. There's a lot of YouTube compilations with millions and millions of views. But back in 2014, which is 7 years ago, which is the same year when I started. So, what did you see, and what did catch you from the shuffle? Like, what did you find? Did you see it in festivals? Did you see it on YouTube? What was the catch to start shuffling for you?
I think that I saw a few different types of dancers at festivals here and there, but it wasn't until I started seeing the videos popping up on my Instagram specifically, was where I was first kind of starting to see the videos, which I know for most people it tends to be YouTube. Oh, sorry, here, let me just remove my WhatsApp. um, Don't want that in the background. So I think most people were introduced through YouTube, but for me, I was seeing videos on my Instagram feed, and I don't know if it was a sign from the universe that, it was something that I needed to be called to, but I specifically saw a dancer here from Canada. Her name was Kayla Bono, I believe. And she was executing a hybrid style of shuffling. So she was doing a cutting shapes type of shuffle, but she was incorporating rocking elements as well. So right off the bat, I was exposed to someone who wasn't just specifically doing the one stream of cutting shapes, but she was mixing a bit of Melbourne into her style. And from there, I just made a pact with myself. I keep seeing these dancers at festivals. I keep getting excited by it. And now, it's just popping up randomly on my Instagram feed. Like there's obviously a reason that I keep seeing this, and I like to read into signs that way. So from there, I dedicated myself to learning and to practicing. I made a pact with myself basically that I was going to learn and perfect this style of dance. And I definitely showed up for myself in that sense for sure. So from that moment on, I was constantly practicing. I was
Yeah.
constantly trying to learn.
Right now, it's difficult to not see a shuffle video in social media.
It's so
They're everywhere.
Yeah, it's so crazy the journey we've made from then till now, and how it was just kind of like considered almost like an underground fad, a very niche area. And now we're seeing it pop up everywhere, especially with the TikTok boom. I think that we've truly seen shuffling grow like so immensely in social media.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. This is I always say that when a new social media comes out, another boom for shuffle is awaiting. So when YouTube
It's
came out,
true.
shuffle boom. When Instagram, shuffle boom. Now TikTok, shuffle boom again. So if there's any new social media, let's let's wait for another boom for us. So everything good for us. More people to the community.
I totally agree with that. I think that no matter what way people are introduced to shuffling, more times than not, it sparks their interest for them to look into the style deeper, especially if they're wanting to learn themselves. So I think ultimately it's always a good thing to be exposed to shuffling through
Yeah,
social
and
media.
And right now, there's a lot of people being professional, as you, for example, that back in the days when we were starting, there was no one. Like, as you said, it was super underground, very niche. There was like no professional. It was really bad seeing to see people charging for classes. We'll talk about this topic later. But I think that right now there's a lot of resources, and people who start shuffling, they have like a path, and they have workshops, they have events, they have a lot of meetups. They can connect with other people from using social media, and this is something that back in the days it wasn't there. It had nothing to do with the shuffle culture. It was just in the raves or in the streets for where shuffle was a little known. So I think this is great because all the social media, it helped us to bring a lot of people, to draw a lot of attention to the shuffle, and make people want to learn shuffle or wanting shuffle to be showcased in an event or in a multidiscipline dance event, and they want to add also the shuffle. So I think social media has helped shuffle really much in this way, but it has the other side of the coin, which also leads to a lot of misinformation, people not knowing the culture, where it's coming from, people thinking that a crossed running man is like the most basic and doing just that. Yeah, I know shuffle, I know everything about shuffle. So what do you think about this misinformation that every time people who is working for spreading the culture right is each time is decreasing, but how do you see this huge gap of misinformation there that exists and keep existing in the shuffle scene right now?
I think ultimately we have to look at, where it's coming from, like the place of where it's coming from when people are sharing misinformation. And more oftentimes than not, it's because people are so excited by shuffling. They're so invested in shuffling from such an early stage in their journey, at least, from what I'm witnessing. And they're noticing that people around them want to learn. And, being someone who's still in a very early stage of their shuffling career, but also wanting to help spread shuffling and allow more people access to learning. I think that we see a lot of people just trying to put out information to truly just help and benefit those around them. And of course, when it's coming from a place of love and when people are truly trying to spread the dance style, we can't we can't get so angry at, what their intentions are, because no one truly wants to destroy shuffling or has bad intentions with, what they spread. But oftentimes they just are not educated enough or understanding of all the history and culture and background in shuffling that there is. I mean, even with new students, more oftentimes than not, I'm asking them what styles they want to embody, because as a teacher, I offer a multitude of styles and I do teach a lot of different styles and terminology. And I also want to know what the student is wanting to achieve with their shuffling as well. So asking that so many times, or I would say 70% of the time, the student doesn't even know the difference between all these different types of shuffling. So, as educators, of course, it is our job to make sure that the legacy and the culture of shuffling lives on and it's done appropriately and respectfully and in the right way. But we have to kind of look at the reasoning behind why misinformation is spreading. And generally, it's just because people want to share shuffling with others and they're not aware of the fact that they might be hurting people's feelings by sharing misinformation or not doing their homework fully enough to understand that they're teaching a style maybe that they fully don't know about or that they have all the knowledge and the insight to. So there's definitely a culture of misinformation that's starting to, I guess, grow a little bit more. If we look at the root of this, I think there's no harm in it. And obviously, there's no bad intentions with these people. But at the same time, being someone who cares so much about shuffling, and I've really dedicated my life to researching and making sure that I'm teaching everything appropriately, it's hard from a teacher's perspective. Seeing, all the time and effort and, the amount of people I've interviewed and talked to and, even traveled the world to speak with so that I was able to understand more about shuffling, and then seeing people just blatantly putting out information that is completely inaccurate or has no actual research behind it. It definitely, it's hard to see. It's hard to see because, you know, being a teacher, I think it's important that we're sharing the right information. So when I see that people aren't, there's no whistleblowers, there's no person to kind of come out and say, you're doing this wrong, right? So as a community, we start to collectively get angry or call these
Yeah.
people out. But that's not necessarily the right way to go about this either, because that's just going to create hostility and it's going to create conflict and anger within the community. And that's really not what we need right now. I think we truly need this community to come together to figure out the best way forward. All of us, right? So we need to have some sort of way to clarify the different types of styles so that people can find this information easily when they're, deciding that they want to embark on a journey of teaching.
Yeah, I have the same approach than you. I always say that when people teaches in wrong, like they don't know that they are teaching wrong. Like imagine someone thinking, okay, I'm going to teach shuffle the bad way. It's like it makes no sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
people who is sharing or teaching, and if they are doing it wrong, maybe they don't know that they are wrong. Maybe they have been told that, and maybe the people who taught them that they didn't even know that they were teaching it wrong. So like there's like a huge gap with which it is solved with researching and then sharing the information the right way, not telling like, okay, you're wrong and I'm right, or this pointing at the people. It helps zero to the community. And I think that people who is really into shuffling and wants the people to know the right history, the right culture, the right explanation of why the steps, why this other, why the cutting shapes, why the Melbourne Shuffle, why everything. People, it doesn't matter the followers or the account or the years that they are into shuffling. They're going to share it because I've seen people from all types sharing the information. For example, I saw the first podcast with Cassidy and Mr. Shapes, who is very informational about the cutting shapes beginnings, how is really born this movement. That it really is it's shuffling is not like something different which was with that someone invented because they wanted to add this massive misinformation into the shuffling scene. So I've seen people from everywhere around the world, from new people, OGs, sharing this information. So this is very hopeful for me because I see like that people wants to share this information, and this is a place to go against that, to go against the misinformation and try to bring here people who has a lot of experience in certain areas or in general, because there's people here, for example, like you, which you have worked all these styles, you have interviewed a lot of people, you also have traveled, and there's people who is like very expert in niche thing, because we can't find anyone more specialist in cutting shapes history or beginnings than Mr. Shapes and Cassidy Chaps. Like there's no one.
Exactly. I totally agree because you're going right to the source where the movement was born from. So it only makes sense that if we're spreading the correct information right from the source, hopefully more people will have access to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, I think that sometimes the misinformation drowns out the information, and that's what's hard because if we had started providing the right information back in 2014, for example, when I was looking for the proper information, I had to go to the OGs, and a lot of them were gatekeeping information, believe it or not. So sometimes they wouldn't even share the information that I wanted to know. They'd say, figure it out yourself. And if we had started right from that point, and I'm not going to name names because you know what, as a culture, it was happening. It definitely was. And even early on, myself and Sam were both part of California Shuffle Crews. I was part of Star 67, and she was part of God's Mighty Heroes. So we had access to talking to people within our crews and having information that way. So I do think that it truly helped us. But in some ways, it was not always the best experience because we were also thrown into all of the the inner workings of the shuffling community in California. And there were a lot of people who were willing to give information and who were so excited by our excitement and wanted to share information correctly. And there were other people who did not and who withheld information maybe only for their crews or they didn't want to share.
Mm-hmm.
So my, I guess, outlook from the get-go was, if we want shuffle to become a global dance style that's recognized, we need to share information and we need to start doing it. So, I mean, even the rocking video that Sam and I put out, we tried so hard to just really collect as much information as we could for that, so that we could truly help and benefit. And I still have people to this day telling me, oh my gosh, your video helped me so much. It's how I learned how to rock. And back then, there was not even a video on how to rock. So if we started putting out information a little bit earlier, instead of withholding information or keeping it collectively for specific communities or specific crews, then I think that this wouldn't have happened so much. And of course, it's hard to say, oh, it's all in the past and we could go back and change things, but we can only rewrite our future, right? We can only create a better path for our future. So we need to look at, where our areas of opportunity were in the past, where we could learn from, and then moving forward, how we can start to spread this correct information. And people like you who are, creating podcasts, I think it's so good what you're doing, because you're ultimately bringing more people and bringing attention to, the issues surrounding shuffling and how we can better move forward.
So I think that the good thing that we have right now is that a lot of people is sharing, and not many people is like just keeping the information for themselves. And I want to specific one thing here that is very different. Don't want to share like general knowledge about shuffling than not wanting to share like specific things that you're already like you keep researching or studying. And but because, for example, you and I, we both are teachers, and I know that there's some things that I will explain no matter who asks me, but there's some things that I will keep for my classes, for example, or because there are things that I'm working on it in a more professional way. And sometimes when people just want to ask for advice, or just for, I don't know, they want to learn some move, they maybe just want to know this. Like, you don't have to give them like a very wide and big explanation. It's just maybe you teach them like fast, or explain them basically
like a summary instead of like a full, very in-depth explanation.
Like this full in-depth explanation, I think is better to keep them for classes, or for people or you have like, I don't know, open studio, or in a meetup if someone is really, really interested in one topic in a specific. So I think that this also, if you teach, if you have like this part of, I don't know, teaching free, it can be posting tutorials, it can be sharing when in a meetup, when someone asks you anything, or social media's DMs. And if you are sharing information and people likes you, how do you explain and how do you dance, they maybe even end up being one of your students. So like, I think that we need to be always open to share the information that we have, because as you said, back in the days, I would have loved to have someone who was telling me, okay, first this and then this other thing and that's the other one, and if you want to try this, have this in mind, because if not, you can do it wrong or whatever. Like, there's a lot of things that go in shuffling and in whatever dance style, but in specific in shuffling there was no information at all. So we were like very blind, going and researching and seeing, okay, I already learned the running man step, what more right now, because it was difficult to find back in the days.
True. It's so true. I completely agree. And even now, we have the option to learn those initial foundations. And then we even have the option to say, which style do I want to learn? Which style, what kind of shuffler do I want to be? Because in the beginning, even myself coming into the shuffle community and not having access to a lot of information, I didn't know what the difference was between the styles, because there was no videos surrounding styles explaining the differences of shuffling. I just had to find that information from different people. But now we actually can go to people, like you said, who specify in different styles of shuffling, or, for example, who know a lot of different types of shuffling as well, who can teach different kinds. Because even back then, we were a little bit blind to how do I want my shuffling to look? We just thought, okay, I want to learn more, 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 but we didn't even really have an idea as to what direction we were heading in back then.
Yeah.
But you can look back and say, oh, I guess I was learning, Melbourne shuffle at this point, and oh, I was learning this at this point. But, you know, at that specific time, especially being someone who was new to shuffling, I didn't know what I was learning at all. I just knew that I wanted to do it and I was excited by it. And now it's so much easier to understand the differences, to get access to people who will teach you their specific way of shuffle or that specific style of shuffles. So we have so many more opportunities to learn and grow as individuals and as a community.
And talking about the different styles, there's still happening this huge debate and this and general discussion, let's call it this way, about shuffling and shapes. I don't know. What do you think about that, and what approach do you have to this? Because there's people that knows that they are both shuffling, but they just want to do one style. There are people that says no, cutting shapes is one thing and shuffling is another thing. Like not cutting and Melbourne shuffle, which within the shuffle umbrella there are different sub styles, but they say no, cutting shapes is one thing and Melbourne and shuffle is another very different thing. So what would you say to people who is introducing and getting started into shuffling, and maybe people who is been in the shuffling for many years and they don't have the right information? So what's your approach to
this is a really touchy subject, but this is not new. I know a lot of people that are new to the community right now are saying, oh my gosh, what's happening? Why is there a debate on styles? This is not new, even from when I started shuffling, especially being in a predominantly Melbourne community here in Toronto. I was I don't want to say I was told that, cutting shapes isn't the same, or, it's not as, it was almost being put like Melbourne was on a pedestal and cutting shapes was, oh, this is not good, or it was being often compared even at the time when I started. And from informing myself, from talking to people within the community and from people who have been executing cutting shapes as a style for many years, I truly believe that we should think of shuffling as an umbrella. Just as you said, this is how I teach my students. And there are a lot of different things that were inspired by shuffling. Like if you take Melbourne, for example, and then you look at Malaysian style, and specifically if we look at maybe, Russian Malaysian style or Brazilian Malaysian style, these are extremely different elements and variations to our existing Melbourne shuffle. These are not just, oh, I'm doing like a slightly different thing. Some forms of Malaysian shuffle are so different than Melbourne. So different in their execution, in the look of it. You would often even think, oh, there's not even specific things that are, like, even if we look at the Malaysian T-step or the cross step, it's so far different than the way we execute a Melbourne T-step. So there's already so many differences between Melbourne and Malaysian. And then we take Cali style as well, which then brought in other forms of shuffling. And this was a normality, right? Like you were able to bring in crumping, you were able to bring in hip hop, you were able to bring in a multitude of genres to up your opponent. Because at the end of the day, we saw Cali as being mostly a battle style and how it emerged. So how are we to say that if cutting shapes was inspired by shuffling and has the same variations to shuffling, how are we to say that it's not within the shuffling umbrella? Yes, it is very different. I will agree with that. There are also other moves that we utilize in cutting shapes that are not found within the other styles. But that does not mean it was not inspired and born out of the shuffling community. And I truly think that even the people that I've talked to, for example, Mark Torr is someone that I've looked up to in the shapes community for many years. And him and I have a great relationship in terms of sharing knowledge and information. And right from the get-go, he was telling me, no. Cutting shapes is a part of shuffling. It is inspired by shuffling. There's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of movement that is found within cutting shapes that we find in other types of shuffling. Yes, the variables are different. Maybe we flex our foot instead of keeping a flat foot. But if you look, for example, between Melbourne and Malaysian style, one, we are pointing our foot down. One, we are landing on the heel. So, how are we to say that cutting shapes now we're flexing the heel fully is not part of shuffling anymore?
Yeah.
Right. So, in my personal opinion, I teach it as a sub-genre of shuffling. I always make the distinction with my students. So I don't just say, this is shuffling and this is shuffling and this is shuffling. I tell them, this is Melbourne shuffle. This is where it came from. This is how Malaysian shuffle developed. This is where Cali comes from. I give them the ins and outs of the styles. I explain that they are different because this is the problem that most people are having is people who are doing cutting shapes, for example, are just calling it shuffling. And I get it. We're trying to be more specific as a community moving forward because we need to educate people about the styles, about the differences. So calling it just shuffling is really not helping anyone. Even when you're doing, for example, Moz style, you shouldn't just say, "Oh, I'm shuffling." Many people want to clarify now what type of shuffling they're doing so that they're educating the community effectively so that more people understand the differences and can also inform themselves whether they want to become a Moz style shuffler, if they want to, solely focus on Melbourne, if they only want to do cutting shapes. That is the choice of the individual. And that's why shuffling is so beautiful. It's so diverse. You can decide how you want to shuffle. You can mix the styles if you want. A truly, I mean, when I look at my personal style, when I'm expressing myself authentically, I tend to mix elements of Melbourne and cutting shapes. Is that wrong? How could I mix cutting shapes unless it was a form of shuffling? And it flows so beautifully and it works so well with the counting structure. And I have so many variations that are similar. How could I mix cutting shapes unless it was truly under the shuffling umbrella? And I think ultimately, yes, there are other styles like house or like Miami step that we consider to be completely separated from shuffling based on their origins and how they were created. But if we look at the origins of cutting shapes and it truly being inspired by shuffling and by the Melbourne shuffle movement, how are we to say that it's completely separate as a style?
Well,
And that's personally my outlook. I know that a lot of people have difference in opinion, but that's how I see it.
This is a really correct approach, I would say. And actually, as cutting shapes is just shuffling in itself, but it was the shuffle that was being danced in London, because first time shuffle was seen was in London, and they were dancing to house music. So this housey music were leading them to dance this way. So this was a really particular shuffle style, like the one they had in London, and they called it cutting shapes because the shapes they were doing with the arms, and then the people from outside from the UK they started to call to the foot movements cutting shapes because it was very different because the Melbourne. So this is when the all the misunderstanding starts because people were calling shapes to the foot movement when it was just the arms related, but it was just London dancing shuffle and adding the arms and calling it shapes to the arms. But now there's with after all these years, I think we cannot undo like this misunderstanding. So we have to live with it and try to spread the correct information. And for
For sure.
example, in my case, you said that it's good to specify if you to not say if you dance shuffle and say that you dance, for example, Malaysian shuffle or I dance Cali shuffle or I dance Melbourne shuffle. So what happens to the people who has like a hybrid style, let's say this way? Because for example, in my case, I don't think if I'm doing more Melbourne or more shapes, depending on the song or the vibes or I don't know whatever happens in my head, I
I
just
know
do
exactly
more
what
of one
you're saying.
thing or more of the other. So like when people ask me what do I dance, I just say shuffle because I don't consider I just dance one style. Like I can isolate and just do one style because I've learned them. But when I just freestyle, I don't think about going to Melbourne or shape. It's like you said, like you can mix shuffle and Melbourne in the same round, and it flows incredibly well, and there's no problem. So what could these people say? The people who is mixing up everything and don't think about substyles and just focus on dancing and the shuffle essence, which is stomping and shuffling and dragging the foot.
For sure. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, how we authentically want to share our expression of movement is the most important. So someone telling you, oh, you're not shuffling, oh, you're shuffling, none of this truly matters when it comes to the individual, because the reason why we shuffle should come from born of passion. It should be born of expression. It should be born of pure joy, because that's what shuffling is. And anyone who's a shuffler will tell you, I shuffle because it brings me happiness. I'm just expressing myself. And I feel like a lot of people compare it to meditation, where they are zoning out, they're feeling the music. When we go into a freestyle and we're just truly, in our element, we completely zone out and we're not thinking, oh, I'm doing Melbourne Shuffle. I completely agree, because coming from the same background, when you learn so many styles, you tend to mix them and they tend to just come out as you're dancing. And that's why I clarify to many people that I myself am a hybrid, because there are specific people who will not touch any other style of shuffling and they will only embody one style because that's the way they want to look.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's up to the individual.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that we still need clarification in some sense. Like, for example, when I offer a hybrid shuffle workshop, I clarify, okay, for this particular workshop, I'm going to be doing a hybrid shuffle, but we're going to be mixing styles of Melbourne and cutting shapes. So they can understand, okay, I'm learning the foundations of this, I'm applying the foundations of this, and they are still understanding how they're mixing them together. Because from an educator's perspective, we still need terminology. We still need understanding of where our movement stems from. Because if we want to look a particular way, for example, if a dancer says, I love this floating style of smooth flow and constant sliding on the floor, and they want to have a particular element to their shuffling, then usually I'll recommend them, you should learn and understand the style behind Melbourne, because this will create much more flow and continuity to your shuffling. And especially because when we learn rocking, this creates a great general sense of flow to our shuffling, right? So certain elements are important to reference and understand where they come from. Because when, for example, when we teach rocking, we should understand this is coming from Melbourne. This isn't, oh, I'm mixing whatever and whatever. No, this is a particular type of shuffling called rocking. Certain Melbourne shufflers, it was actually within their movement that they would call themselves rockers. It was a particular type of Melbourne shuffle. We have to understand where it comes from in order to embody it. From there is no need to, say you can only do Melbourne and you can only do this. You can't mix the styles. That's not the case. Mm-hmm. You should be able to mix and do whatever you want. And in fact, I encourage this with my students, as long as they understand where it's coming from, the terminology, how to execute it. When we better understand these things, we can only execute hybrid dancing in a better way, mm-hmm. right? Because if we don't fully understand the fundamentals and the roots of what we're trying to execute in our hybrid dancing, how can we mix all of our styles together? It's going to become even harder, right? Because we don't understand the correct technique. We don't understand, how to execute these movements. So we still need to take it back to, let's learn and understand and demonstrate this effectively. And then let's figure out the multitude of ways that we can create variation to this, that we can bring it into other types of flow, other types of shuffle. So I don't think that, everyone needs to be saying, this is the type of shuffle I do. This is what I'm doing right now. That's not the case. But when it comes to educators, we need to be more clear. right? Because
Yeah.
as a person who's just expressing themselves and who is doing shuffle as a hobby, it's something that they just love to share with the world. They don't need to be telling everybody, this is the exact shuffle I'm doing in this video. They don't need to share that. But when you're a teacher and you're respected in the community for teaching, you need to be sharing the correct information and allowing people to take that information and apply to their dancing however they
Hmm.
want. We don't have to tell them how they need to dance, but we do need to educate them on what the background is, what the terminology
Yeah,
is, how executing the
because
movement.
it's really difficult. We need to clear them the information and tell them the way and that they need to follow in order to learn and approach shuffle correctly, because it's really massive right now, because there's a lot of sub styles, and there hasn't been a professional culture with so many years. Like it's not an established professional
Yep,
culture. Like is building, but is this hard work right now that that people who are with teachers need to do to is to
exactly.
lead them to this correct information. Particularly myself, I the approach that I have when getting someone started in shuffling is to make them understand like the general shuffle foundation. Like first time I don't tell them like, okay, there's Melbourne, cutting shapes, Malaysian, which one do you want? Like it's like
I agree. That is
it's like a menu. Okay, first plate, what style do you want? No, but I want to I like to teach them like the running man, the most basic running man that exists, which is like flat foot, no strong
exactly,
like weight balance, just
exactly.
like the normal running man. So and the normal T step, the normal Charleston with no staying in the place, like going back and forth. And I try to make them go through to the really 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 fundamental steps and concepts, which are slides, spins, things that are very used in whatever shuffle style you want. Like I make them go through that, and then I start teaching them and equipping them with tools. Let's say this way. Like I instead of making them choose a style, because I think that making them choose or maybe they don't know which style uh, do they
Or they
want.
mind because
Yeah,
oftentimes my students will send me a video and like, oh, actually, I want to do this instead. This is so, so cool. And it's completely opposite. They're trying to learn cutting shapes and it's Cali
yeah,
shuffle video, right?
yeah.
So
So I really try to focus, because this is the way I learned, and and this is what led me to the dancer I am today, which I don't have like barriers within without and changing styles. I just try to dance. I listen to the music, I process it, and then I dance. So of course, if I hear upside trance music, I probably will dance like more Melbourne or Malaysian style than cutting shapes. I can maybe throw some shapes or footwork, but because I have the resources. But mainly, you will see me dancing like really strong. And if the song is really housey, I'm probably use the groove more of the shapes. So I prefer the people to go through the really fundamentals, like the most basic stuff you can find in shuffling, and then try to equip them with things that made them be able to freestyle and change the steps. And like I like the people to feel that they are capable of doing whatever they want. Like, okay, I can take this step and build some variation, and then now I change to the running man, and I can add a slide and then a spin. And I like the people to explore and develop like their own particular style. Of course, I like to throughout all this process, I speak about the shuffle styles, about what is cutting shapes, what is Melbourne, where do they come from, why is people considering these cutting shapes and the other Melbourne. I explain them the way I see it. That is just for me, they're just tags. I know that all of them, like you can teach specifically cutting shapes because there's, as you said, there's things that cutting shapes has, which Melbourne doesn't or Malaysian doesn't. So I
Exactly.
like I like people to be aware that they can choose to learn something in particular, but if they don't want to focus solely in one style, they can still like they are not needed to choose one. They can just continue with the general shuffle journey without having to choose in shapes or Melbourne. Or okay, I have more friends that then shapes. Maybe if I choose Melbourne, they're going to to tell me something, or I don't know. So I don't
Agreed.
like these
Agreed.
situations to happen, and I know this is just my approach and the way I've learned too. So this is I've learned from Chuflis mostly some years ago, and this is I think this is what helps people the most to have their own unique style. I know people a lot of people say that in Spain like there's not a character, like people can't say which shuffle style do we dance here, like specific.
Right?
And I think it's because of this, because we we focus and approach that in this way, in more of the just learn shuffle in general, and we explain them how what the styles are about. But uh, if we can, we made them choose themselves, not something external which is just cutting shape. So we we like this approach. I know it's just our approach, and I think it works really good
I think
in the people.
such a good approach though, because it's so well rounded. Like you're not specifically saying we only do this and this is the style and that's it, right? Like you're taking a well-rounded approach and you're offering up different different ways to do shuffle, right? You're showing the multitude of diversity within shuffle. And that's so much more beneficial for the student because like you said, when you're dancing to a particular kind of music, for example, if we look to the origins of Melbourne and the hard style that was truly mostly being embodied when people were dancing Melbourne, there's the speed component that made it so much easier to do Melbourne to fast speeds, right? Because it evolved from fast music.
Yeah.
So then when we think we're listening to trance, psytrance, like for me, if I hear psytrance, there's no way I'm mixing my shapes in. There's like a hardcore Melbourne dancer that comes out, right? So the elements to each style were born out of the music that they came from too, right? Because as you say with cutting shapes, they were inspired by mostly house music, which makes so much sense as to how the style is executed, right?
Yeah.
Because it works so well with that groovy, boppy house music. When I'm listening to house music, yes, I can mix in, you can mix any style. There's no rules, of course. But more times often than not, I'm definitely hitting more of a cutting shapes flow. Maybe I'm mixing in some Melbourne or elements of other styles, but it's more fun to execute a difference in shuffle as opposed to keeping your shuffling the same for all types of music and all types of vibes, as you said as well. Sometimes the vibe is just different. Sometimes the mood is different and you just want to dance a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's important, again, to be able to offer up all these different types of styles to the student so that they are able to create new pathways, to have different ways of shuffling, that they're always able to evolve and change their style, and that they're not secluded to just doing one thing the same forever and ever, right? Because this would get boring. The reason why I personally wanted to learn all these different styles is because I wanted to continue challenging myself. And many people do. Many people kind of, they get bored within the same thing over and over. And there's only so much they can do at that point. So they decide, okay, you know what? Let's branch off and let's try something different and challenge ourselves again and really start from almost like from the bottom again as a student and work our way up again until we are able to fully demonstrate and execute that style. So I think there's a lot of positives to learning multiple styles of shuffle. Some people are very against it, and that is okay because it's all a personal opinion. But I think most of the people I've talked to, especially when it comes to educators, they will tell you like learn all the styles. It's so much better. It's so much more fun. You
Yeah.
get to learn elements of each and incorporate elements of each to your own personal style, and then truly formulate the style that you want to embody that's unique to you, right? Pulling from elements of everything.
You see people complaining in general is people who is not focusing on teaching. It's just, complaining and seeing things happen and just say their thing and do nothing. So I don't really care about people's opinion when they're not really doing something to solve the problem. For them, if it's really a problem, if it's that big of a problem that makes them complain this hard and they're so angry that they want to complain so much, they should be doing something. So when I see that they aren't actually doing anything for solving this problem they say exists, I just pass on and I
Answer is the answer to these people is that I have is put in the work,
yeah.
because educators are putting in the work. We are putting in the work. We are doing so much work. We are trying so hard to make sure that people are well informed, that shuffling stays, within the culture, and that people are understanding the differences, and we're doing so much as educators. We're not just one day wake up and, oh, I'm gonna do this today. Like, there's months, years, I'm probably one of like the first people who started teaching in this community in terms of in Canada and maybe in the North American culture of shuffling. And I was truly inspired by what you guys are doing out there, because I think that you guys have a great approach to teaching, that you're not fully, putting other people down and saying, oh, this isn't shuffle, this is shuffle. I think that, we can learn a lot from your community specifically, but at the end of the day, it doesn't do any good to sit around and complain and do nothing about it. And people will say, "Oh, well, it's already too late. There's already so many people." That's not the case, because the reason why we have so many educators that are rising up is because there is a demand for educators. There is a demand
Yeah.
for learning. So it's not too late. It's not too late, especially if you're an OG, you have something to offer. It's not too late. Show us what you want to see. Show us the change that you want to see. It's hard in the beginning. It was hard for all of us. I'm not saying it was easy, quitting my job and becoming an educator full time. This was hard work. Okay? This was a lot of hard work. So when people are, saying, "Oh, like, you shouldn't charge for shuffling, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that." It's not about that. Pay no mind to that, right? Because the people who are putting in the work and the people who are dedicating their time to advancing this community, those are the people that, are taking the time to actually help and put in, the correct, they're putting in, the time and effort, and they're making the movement evolve in the correct way, right? So if we want to see that happen, and it comes back to what I was saying before, how it was so hard to find information, back in the 2013, 2014 era, because oftentimes, you would even talk to people who are executing these movements or these styles, and they didn't even want to share the information. It's almost like, we've done a full 360 where now people are sharing the information, and, oh, it's angering people. Well, maybe if we just shared the information, if those particular individuals who have a problem with how it's being shared now, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you decide to share the information that you have access to, that you've, spent time and energy and years formulating, and all the experience that you have? There's nothing wrong with that. And we still need educators to rise up.
Yeah.
And the people who are putting in the work and the time and effort, we shouldn't be scolding them or telling them you're doing this wrong or you're charging for shuffling. It shouldn't be about that anymore. Okay? Just focus on you and how you can contribute to the community in the way that you want to. That's what we should be thinking about.
It's just the I don't know, this excuse, because for me it's an excuse about, yeah, this is really bad for the community, but it's too late. it's too late for many things, but not for trying to educate the community. Like, if you never do nothing, you're already late. If you could have started 4 years ago, maybe you are late, but you can still start, and you have, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years that you can work on. Because I always say that people who wants to start teaching, I always tell them, do the research, try to get information, and start teaching. It doesn't matter if it's just one step, because for teaching, you just need to know a little bit more than the people you that are learning from you. Obviously, to become a great teacher, you can't be a great teacher in the beginnings, and waiting to be a great teacher to start teaching. Because to be a really good teacher, you need to go to get on this ride, and do classes and classes and classes and classes and a lot of classes. And this is how a really good teacher builds him and herself. So let's talk about this topic, because you're already telling things about charging classes, which is a lot of it's already a really candid topic too, especially with more OG shufflers, which were just in the community for sharing. And back in the days, it was just all about love and sharing. And there's, I wouldn't say that it's many people, but there's some dancers who are known because they have been in the game for so long, and their opinion is complete opposite to what we're seeing nowadays, with people charging for classes or specific workshops and events. And how do you approach that? Because you also have a business right now. Like, as you said, you quit your job to
Yeah.
dedicate your full time in teaching shuffling. So how is this process about having a job and quitting? And I suppose it was gradually, maybe, I don't know. So you're going to talk us through
Yeah,
that. And
I can
and how do
clarify.
you end in this 100% full time in shuffling teaching?
For sure. I think it's helpful to clarify because if we don't understand the process behind our educators and what it took for them, then we can't really truly understand, where people are coming from when they're charging money for classes. And for me personally, coming from, a career path where I was a project manager, I had long hours already, working 9 to 5 job. And then on top of that, I started teaching 4 years ago, but I was only doing group workshops to teach the foundations of shuffling because I personally felt that I was not ready to tackle more than that because I was still in the process of informing myself, gaining knowledge. I'm telling you, even after 7 years, I am still collecting knowledge and I'm still informing myself and I'm still researching and writing and constantly, making sure that I'm able to continue growing as a teacher so I can offer more to my students. But coming from working a full-time job already where I was working 40, 50 hours a week, and then every day after work, I started hosting one-on-one private sessions because I was finding that so many people in my group workshops wanted individualized attention. They wanted coaching. They wanted a trainer, right? They didn't just want, a group class here and there. And that's where I was truly able to start honing in on my structure for teaching, the structure in which you should learn as well. Perfecting that over the years has been something that has truly helped me as an educator as well, not just kind of blindly going into things and showing them whatever moves. Like I'm showing from a very strong structure in which I've formulated the best ways to learn how to shuffle and to be able to embody multiple styles. So teaching one-on-ones was very gratifying and I was finding that I was able to connect with my students. I was helping them in more ways than just shuffle. I was helping them express themselves. They were finding joy when maybe there was, things going on in their life that were heavy for them, right? So even just being able to provide them an outlet to express themselves and to have joy in their life and to be able to accomplish what they wanted with shuffling was bringing me so much happiness in my ability to help others. So I started realizing that my client base was growing quite a bit. And it was almost every day and all weekend after work that I was teaching one-on-ones, teaching workshops. It was never ending. And I was just exhausting myself. I was tired all the time. My boss at work was upset with me because he could tell that my capacity to do my job was dwindling because I was just, I'm doing too much, right? And I had to, at that point, make a decision, where my life path was headed. And luckily I have a great partner who was very understanding because, having to pay all the bills and the rent and just quitting my job cold turkey was very scary. I'm not going to lie, but I knew that shuffling was growing and I wanted to be part of that movement and I wanted to help it grow and I wanted to dedicate my full time to this, not just, part of my time. I wanted to be able to dedicate my full self to this and dedicate myself to assisting others. And so I decided to quit my job, and that was extremely hard. If we are dedicating our lives to growing this movement, is it not fair to be charging a fee for that? Is our time and our effort and our experience not worth that? We pay money to personal trainers to train us. They're showing us how to do exercises, they're training us, they're helping us live a better lifestyle. Why can't we have that for shuffling too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know the mentality is only a few people who have this idea that, oh, shuffling should be free. And those people, if they want to teach free shuffling lessons, nobody's stopping them, right? If somebody wants to pay for a service, that's up to the person who's paying for the shuffle lesson, not for the person who, decides he wants to host free shuffle
Mm-hmm.
lessons. So I don't think that it's wrong to teach free classes and to educate for free. I'm constantly providing advice. I try to do as many tutorials as I can. I try to continue educating and offering solutions for people who can't afford to pay for shuffling classes. But at the end of the day, when someone's paying me for one-on-one time, they are getting my full individualized attention for training, for coaching on their journey, structuring their lessons, creating lesson plans. I don't just show up to my lessons like with no understanding of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Every single client that I have, they go through an individual questionnaire. I get to know them. I figure out what their specific needs are, and therefore I'm tailoring my classes specifically for them every single time. This takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It's constant for me to continue growing and educating myself too, as well, to be able to provide them the information and the knowledge that they're looking for and they're seeking. So I think ultimately, taking shuffling as a career path is something that is possible nowadays. And I encourage it to those who are scared, because if there are people who are already, interested in learning from you, or, if you're doing this professionally as well and becoming a professional shuffle dancer, there's a lot of opportunities for shuffling as in that sense too, right? Like to have paid gigs of shuffling where you are in a music video or in a commercial. These are normalized things as
Mm-hmm.
well. So we can't stay in the old mentality of, oh, like we want to keep this underground. We don't want to charge. We want this to be a small scale thing, because shuffling is growing whether people like it or not. Shuffling is becoming a global phenomenon. It's a global recognized dance genre now. Whereas, back in 2014, if I mentioned to people, oh, I'm teaching shuffle lessons, they're like, what? How to shuffle cards? They don't understand at all. Right? So now you mention shuffling to anyone and they know what it is. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen that on social media. Oh, I saw it on TikTok the other day. It's a normal thing. So people want to learn. It's growing and expanding to the point where there's so many people that want to learn. So we need individuals to really take the lead on this and to provide all the insights on how to learn, the structure, the process to learning. It's not just a simple thing where you just, teach a running man and a T-step and then you call it a day. Like educators are doing so much. And then on the creative side of things too, we're offering Just like how you see in hip hop communities or other communities of shuffle, we're offering our creative spin on things. We're offering choreography. We're offering how specifically we execute movement and how other people can pick this up and learn and practice and eventually get to the point where they are able to execute these things as well. The creative side to shuffling, taking somebody's class because you love the way they dance and their specific choreography and all the routines and the combos they're constantly working to create, those are things that people also truly want access to. And if instructors are willing to do so, then why is there a problem with this, right? So I don't know. It's always been a topic of discussion, especially
Yeah.
because I was one of the first. I was heavily criticized, and I'm sure that other people are heavily criticized depending on, what community they're coming from. But at the end of the day, you can't look back. You can't look at the people who are criticizing you. You just have to focus on the people that you're working for and doing the good for, and the people that you've affected their lives. And the amount of people who tell me, like, you've literally changed my life, like shuffling changed my life, and you helped me achieve something so beautiful. How are we to say that it should be free? I just don't understand this mentality. I never have. Other dance styles, people pay upwards of thousands of dollars to put their kids in competitive dance growing up and to learn the structure and the technique and how to execute dancing in very disciplined ways. We're taking that same sense of discipline and we're applying it to shuffling. So I personally feel that it's just the same. And this is what's going to make shuffling more recognized, is people who are taking it to a professional level with educating.
There's some things that I want to mention. That is that all the dance styles in their beginnings, there was no charging for nothing because it was just sharing love, the movement itself, nothing more, no business, no nothing. But as the culture starts being more professional, starting to grow, this is because there's people working full time and putting their time and effort to make this grow, to research information, to put them into this position for the students, or sharing it for free in their tutorials, in their pages, in their blogs, in their podcasts. I don't know. There's a lot of things that you can share all the information that you may have. And there's this thing that when it's not saying that learning for free is bad, because I think that this is how we all start from. Like, I started learning free from a tutorial, but I noticed that when people pays for classes, they take it more seriously because they've put their money into this class. So they already go and expect something in exchange for this money, which is a qualified teacher. So I think that the bad thing is that someone who has no experience is charging a lot of money. I'm not saying they charge money, because I think everyone's time is valuable. So you can't say that someone with just a little experience can't be charging. It can be charging, but maybe they can't be charging that much as Rebel, for example, who has a lot a lot of knowledge in shuffling. And there is
Coming from
also yeah, but
not in terms of me, but in general, because even when I take other people's classes too, I mean, I've paid for tons of workshops because at the end of the day, as teachers, we also need to do our part in learning as well.
yeah.
And you look for the people who are teaching professionally. You want that quality of teaching for what you're paying for.
Yeah, and uh, I wanted to mention that now that you brought it up, that uh, this is so important, that people think that teachers just teach because they know so much. But if you see a teacher that it, they don't go to dance classes to another style, or to another shuffle teacher within this dance, maybe this teacher is like really relaxed, let's say like this way. So there will be a point where the teacher will have no more information to bring you, because if they're not going to classes and not doing researching, maybe uh, you can learn with this teacher, but until a certain point. Because I've seen that in some teachers that they don't used to take dance classes; they just teach and I don't know, and maybe do some tutorials and dance. They dance a lot, but they don't actually go to get more knowledge and learn more. So I think this is a really huge point that teachers have need to have in mind to keep learning and to keep having the new updates, the new information going to this classroom, to these dance studios. And the other point I wanted to comment is that when people starts being professional in shuffling, like there's people that will never be shuffle professional. I know that many people wants to be professional, but you need to be willing to put the time and effort and give up on a lot of things. People just think that working on shuffling because you like dancing is this is all happiness and like this is like the happy life and wonderland and it's actually not. There's a lot of work and you have
Lots of
to give up a lot of sacrifice. You have to give up on a lot of things, and having people full time on shuffling is not, you're not just, for example, paying for their time and their knowledge and their experience to teach you shuffling. Is you're investing in people who is going to make you to make the shuffle community grow, because they will teach to more people. The community is going to grow if this person also organizes and hosts big workshops, huge meetups. They start making events and they start going bigger and bigger. These things will make people have the opportunity of have more shuffle experiences than just maybe online classes or just some 20 people meetup. Because I, I I see shuffle in the future and I see like big venues with a lot of people, hundreds of dancers, all there, like really a really big movement. And for getting to that point, we need to start with little ones, but to get to this point, we also need a lot of time and effort. And this time, it means that you probably need to be full time in shuffling, and you need to, as you said before, you need to pay the bills. You need to pay the food. You need to pay your everyday life. So
yeah.
it's not just about money, like happy money, like okay, no effort, no nothing. It's just okay. I'm living the life of the dancer, like no 9 to 5 job. Maybe shuffling is taking you 9 to 9 instead of 9 to 5.
Yeah. You know what? When I quit my job, I ended up working more,
Yeah.
like not less. I'm working, oh my gosh. I swear I start in the morning at 9 and I'm not done actually working, whatever I'm doing till sometimes 11 o'clock at night. Like it's nonstop. There's no off button. So I'm glad you mentioned that too, is like people are dedicating their whole lives. It's not like they, oh, a couple hours today and okay, I'm done for the day. That's it. Like we're nonstop. We're working, sometimes I'm working 10 times more than I used to. Right. And of course it's gratifying. Of course, I'm happy that I chose to do this. And I will never complain 1 second for the amount of work that I have to put in, because at the end of the day, I'm I'm helping people and I'm part of that movement, as you say, of a community that I'm helping grow that community, and I'm helping assist people to learn and find their joy with shuffling and help spread that movement too. Because now I even have teachers who are coming to me and they are paying for my time so that I can educate them on how I teach people, because there's so much time and structure and experience and ways that work and ways that don't work, and I've already formulated that. So one thing that I have in terms of advice for educators, especially if you're a new educator, and I'm glad you brought that up, I think that people are so reluctant to ask for help. Everyone is, oh, I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm doing, right? Like I have this down and I know exactly what's going on. But when you're an educator, that's not necessarily the case. we have to take a step back and understand that there are things that we don't know. And I can be the first one to say that. If a student asks me something and I truly don't know it, I don't make up a response. I don't say, "Oh yeah, it's this." Like I don't make up a name for the move even though there's a previous name that existed, which
Hmm.
is happening and has happened with current educators. And that I think when we make those when those instances arise and we make those decisions to create our own way forward instead of figuring out what the actual terminology is or what the actual definition for what they're looking for is, we it's okay to say that we don't know something, but we can also find that out for the student. So if there's something I don't know, I will tell them, listen, I'd rather not tell you something that's not true. I'm going to find out for you, but right now I don't know.
Hmm.
It's okay to say that. And it's okay to go to other educators and ask for help and maybe even pay them for their time so that they can assist you in teaching in the correct manner.
Yeah,
Because
and
that's what they're there for. They've been doing this for so long. They have the experience. They know what they're doing. So why not just go straight to the source and get the proper information? At the end of the day, yes, of course, you're going to have to pay money for that if you're paying for someone else's time. But isn't that so much more valuable for you as a person? You're going to learn and understand things effectively and correctly and have so much more to offer your student base. Isn't that better for you at the end of the day?
and
So
yeah, having this way of working, and if a student asks something and you don't know, this is also projecting that everything you tell them you know about it, so they won't ever think that you're making something up because you need to explain something, or you need to have a response. And like going to these teachers which maybe have been in the game for many years now and working so hard and putting all their time into shuffling, maybe you're not just paying for, okay, I now I have the information, or this step is done this way. Like maybe this person has been 2 or 3 years finding out, or trying to internalize what this step or whatever concept is, how to do it in shuffling, and he's explaining it to you maybe in half an hour or an hour, and you're having the information that this person has been 3 years trying to find out, and write it, or and specifically how is this actually working, and you're learning it in 1 hour. Like, I would have paid so much money to learn things that got me months and years, and to learn them.
a
And
100%. I am in full agreement because if we go back and there was people I could have paid to teach me everything they know, I would have done it in a heartbeat because I value the time and effort and energy and the years and years it's taken for them to understand these concepts. So I'm in full agreement with you. I think it makes the most sense that way.
right now, for example, I'm taking a 14 days Melbourne Shuffle formation from Francis from
And
Melbourne. Yeah, and yesterday it was the first class, and we were like going through the 5 fundamentals of the Melbourne Shuffles that Francis was explaining, and I was feeling a little bit weird because, okay, I've been 7 years into shuffling, but I'm going through the foundations, and I was like, okay, let's go, like let's go through the foundations, and the way Francis was explaining everything and his approach, and it made me start thinking, like, I have one way, like my approach is maybe different from Francis, because Francis is super expert in Melbourne shuffling in specific, because he's a 2007 dancer,
there's,
like he's been 14 years in the game, so
yeah,
it's very long time for a shuffler to keep active, because there's not many people active from these stages or before. And I don't know. I'm just one class. I had done just one class, but I felt like if I really want to become a better teacher, I need to start going going to more classes from overseas teachers, because I know the teachers here in Spain. I've been in their classes. They have been in my classes. Like we've exchanged a lot of information, But right now, I feel that I need to start going with overseas teacher and try to expand and grow my knowledge about shuffle knowledge and about shuffle teaching, because maybe there's something that is a little bit hard for me to teach, and maybe other teacher has found the perfect way or a super easy way to explain one specific thing, and maybe I don't know it yet, and by going to this workshop maybe I can learn it. Or maybe you can find out how not to do a class if you don't like this teacher, for example, because you don't precisely need to go to you will never find all the teachers good. You may find someone that you don't like. Maybe it's not bad teacher, but you don't like the way they do their classes. So maybe this is also a lesson for you of how you don't like a class to be like. So I think you can always find good in going to formation and workshops from other teachers, and I think this is essential if you want to be an educator in shuffling.
Agreed. Agreed. And it's funny you brought up Francis because I've like worked with him closely. I started working with him last like October, November, and he was offering, his different areas of shuffling. He did like a full month where you could, pay for 7 classes and you could take different areas of shuffling. Many of them were areas that I was already teaching, but I was so excited to be learning from someone who's doing Melbourne Shuffle for 14 years. I thought there's got to be something that I'm
Yeah,
going to take from these classes
I had
that
the same mindset.
right? Because from doing shuffling for 7 years versus 14 years, there's one thing that's different and they have more experience than you. So there's probably one or two, if not a multitude, right? Like there's at least something you're going to pick up and learn from taking somebody else's class. So I'm in full agreement. I think that by taking classes, we understand what type of teacher we want to be as well, because oftentimes we can take classes and we can just absorb the way the educator, the process of their teaching, how they structure their lessons, what they are offering to their students, where the value is, and where the things are that you feel there are areas of opportunity, because we all have them, right? We all have areas of opportunity. I even send out an email after every single workshop saying, if you have any feedback, if there's any area of opportunity that you see, where you want to offer me feedback, please do so, because I want to know how are students picking up my classes and what are they gaining, and are there things that I could be doing better? And as educators, by taking other people's classes, we can also start to notice and understand these differences between, how to teach one particular concept. Maybe there's many ways to teach it, and finding the best way for your student, or even knowing how to teach something a multitude of ways is so important, because as an educator, you start to learn, if you're a new educator especially, you start to learn that not everybody understands things the same way.
Yeah.
And the problem is you may teach something one way with one student and right away they get it. They just right like that, they understand it. Other times you'll be teaching the same thing and the same way you're trying to teach is not comprehending with another student. They're just not getting it. So you need to I sometimes pull 5, 6, 7 different ways to teach one concept. If one student's not understanding, you have to keep introducing new ways to teach it until something just clicks and they understand the particular method that you're showing them. So by going to other people's classes, we're also learning other methods and ways to teach the same concepts, which is super helpful as a teacher, because it just makes us a lot more knowledgeable in ways of teaching in general, not just knowledgeable on the subjects that we're teaching, but how we're teaching those subjects and how our students are comprehending those things as well. So I think that taking classes is of utmost importance. I try to take classes overseas as well, because I think that it helps to gain perspective from different places of the world, because we all have developed different shuffle communities, and within those communities there are really unique differences, and those are things to celebrate, and those are things to learn and understand so we can bring them to our communities, right? I mean, when I just as an example, I've taken some classes with Mark when I was there in Spain. I I picked his brain. I said, please tell me everything you know about cutting shapes. I really want to know your perspective on things because, from my understanding, the Spanish shufflers have truly revolutionized cutting shapes. I think that you guys took what the UK was doing and you had something very special within your particular community because it it grew so fast. Like the way that things developed for you guys. Sorry, there's a siren in the background.
It's
But
all
the
right.
way
It's
that
all right. We live with that.
the way that your community evolved in such a healthy, productive way where there was no blames, no finger pointing, this style's good, this style's not good. I loved the I guess perspective that you guys have on shuffling, and that there's lots of different ways to do it, and that we should celebrate all the different ways to do it as opposed to, only one specific way. And I think that your community is something that the world should look to as well as the perfect example of how we should respect all the styles, how the community should grow in an effective and productive way, as opposed to in certain other areas of the world. I won't mention the locations, but certain other places in the world, we see a lot of blame game, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of he said, she said, like constantly cycling around and around. And this is not productive because it's not contributing to our community. It's not helping us grow. It's just almost like being stuck in a loop. So I do think by going to classes as well, you expose yourselves to new communities. You expose yourself to different ideologies within shuffling, right? And that in itself helps you to better understand how we can move forward in a healthy way as a community, as a global community.
And in Spain in particular, like back in the days in 2017, 18, there was like the argument that is happening right now in the States and with the shuffle and shapes and all these things were happening in Spain too. And there's there was a point when I already explained that with Mr. Shapes and Cassidy when we were talking about cutting shapes history, and people from that learned directly the cutting shapes, they will they would get so mad when they were called the shufflers because for them it was really different until we could finally make them understand the origin and why is it shuffling and the similarities and where they could find the similarities between a normal running man and a crossed running man, which is insane. It's just a crossed running man. But but there was people with like a wall here and they wouldn't see anything other than that. And in Spain, there was a big boom and a lot of people that started just with cutting shapes with this Instagram boom, and it was like a trend. But for example, in this moment, I was 3 years into shuffling, and I saw this style, and I said, okay, those are new moves that I don't know yet, so let's learn them. And when I learned them all because they was so repetitive, like they were just doing combos and repeating the same combos, like people was dancing like the same all the time. It was at this point that I said, okay, I want to keep learning. And this is when I went to Chuflis and he started to explain me what he was doing, and he wanted to develop more the shuffle, to establish more the foundation of what the shuffling is and how can we develop the shuffle style, not just like little sub styles. And many of the people that was just doing cutting shapes and it was just for the trend, throughout the time they almost everyone quit. There's a lot of people that stayed, but most of the people that stayed, they didn't start just because the trend, like they really liked the style. And starting doing competitions, it helped it really much because it started to make a differentiation about the people who was just learning the shapes and people who was embracing more things. that just shapes move. And because people was dancing all time with combos, in the first competitions, you had like 10 dancers that were the same. So they weren't really making a difference in the competition. So as we started to do competitions here, like we presented them in a way that uh, that they are done in a healthy way. So there's not like a big well, it's a competition, but it was just not about who wins. It's just
Mhm.
it was
It's not
about,
a best or like, oh, this is the best person, everyone else sucks. It's more about
yeah,
bringing a healthy level of competition.
yeah. So people gets acknowledged that they need to learn more things. They need to take workshops. They need to see, okay, this dancer is he has won more rounds than me. So what is this dancer doing that I'm not doing? Because in Spain we had an open studio. They have it since 2014 or 15, and I didn't meet the community until I was 3 years into shuffling. So I was like 3 years on my own almost. And
Wow.
and and when I met Shuflis and the people who was running the studio wasn't like full. Like there was maybe more than 100 or 200 dancers in Barcelona, and the studio, it was really empty. Be, Having in mind all the dancers that were in Barcelona, and this was because of that, because in that studio they were embracing and the shuffle as a whole, not as just okay cutting shapes or Melbourne or whatever. So people who just wanted to do the cutting shapes, they weren't going there. But after we started to do the competitions, more people started to come, and this is how we started to build like a better community. And then we started to travel around Spain and keep passing this mindset, this information, and competitions and workshops helped so much in Spain. And also in the workshops, we were not just teaching the movements and or the tools or the concepts. We were before the workshops or in the meetups, depending on the event. We were also doing like a talk with the community. So everyone could ask questions. We were explaining a little bit of the history of the context of shuffling and what is going on. And this really helped us to prepare the people to process all the things that were going to happen, like the tournaments and the workshops. Because if we do the talk after the tournament and the workshops, maybe this process, they wouldn't have the right mindset. They wouldn't have had the right mindset going through all that. But doing it before the all the events, they are like predisposed to let all the information in and be more be willing to embrace new knowledge and a different approach than the one they already had. So it was a really hard work here in Spain and also in Latin America, because we have went there too. Mark Tor,
Mm-hmm.
Chuflis, and
Tours
Anderson
that you
also.
guys have
So
done.
it's really been a long journey for being at this point, which there's no drama with cutting shapes and Melbourne shuffling and like every almost everybody knows the thing, and everybody just focus on dancing and sharing and having, well, not competitions now because there's COVID and there's a lot of restrictions yet, but
Too bad. I was excited for that.
yeah, we'll talk now about events and
Hmm.
this is really what helped us to build this community. I think that this is people from Spain, because they just see it what is like here. Like many people don't know what is happening in the US right now. Like they just know how things are in Spain, and because in Spain things are like really calm and nothing is happening. A lot of people is like very like they're just happy and they don't get worried about other
Hmm.
things. But the people who we're trying to expand the knowledge of shuffling, we are aware of things that happening, and we're like, we need to do this work again with overseas communities too. So I
I
think,
think that you guys are the perfect leaders to represent this movement. And I agree, you need to take what you've done in your local Spanish community, and you need to start bringing that not just to Latin America, because I see a lot of, the good that you guys have done in Latin America, and bringing a lot of your same ideologies there was super helpful and beneficial for their communities. But I think that needs to be done for specifically, I want to say the US as a whole right
Yeah,
now is where
I know
we're
that.
struggling most, because I don't see that same struggle here in Canada. I think Canada has a pretty good outlook, and we've looked to Europe a lot for inspiration and understanding and how your communities have run, and we've been very aware of that from the start. And a lot of the leaders here in Canada have been very open-minded to shuffling, and the same way, in the same ways that you guys have been.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the biggest global struggle we're seeing is in the US right now. I think that they are at a standstill in terms of the conflict and the back and forth. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. I also in my street there's also a lot of ambulances and police cars passing by.
Yeah,
So I
I'm
also
moving
have
downtown.
sirens. I also have sirens during the day.
Oh, okay. So I'm not the only one.
No.
I truly think that that's where we're seeing the struggle right now. And I think that it comes down to our leaders, and you guys. Spain is lucky that they had people who rose up like you guys that tried to promote the right ideology. And I think that there's a lot of those people in the US. But the
Yeah.
problem lies that some of the big idols and leaders in the US are not spreading the right mentality,
Mm-hmm.
and are trying to spread the movement through trend as opposed to through love, right? Because shuffling is born out of love, and we always need to take it back to that place. And
Mm-hmm.
if we're taking shuffling to the next level, it needs to be done out of love and not out of fame. Because the people we look to are the ones that inspire the rest of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are idolizing people who don't care for the shuffling community, who care more about advancing themselves than the shuffling community, then that's where we're going to see a problem in open-minded discussions, because those people are not willing to discuss or be open-minded to this new ideology of making sure that, the correct information is spreading, that everyone, all communities are, in unity and not separated between cutting shapes and Melbourne and Cali style. There should not be a divide. We all need to come together. There's shuffling should be all connected in unity, no matter what style you do. But the problem truly lies in who we are idolizing. And I do think a lot of people are waking up to this and realizing, some of the people that they see as leaders in this community, or that they were introduced to shuffling, they're starting to realize that those people are not trying to advance the shuffle movement. They're not
Mm-hmm.
doing their part to positively advance the shuffle movement and in the correct way with unity. Instead, there's a lot of people that are doing this for selfish gains. And this is a process of waking up that a lot of people are waking up to. A lot of people are waking up in general in our society right now with everything that happened with COVID, and having the time to really assess and analyze, how we want to move forward globally. And I think that when we start to shift the focus from such strong idolizing of individuals that are not necessarily trying to advance the shuffle movement, and shift our focus to shuffling as a whole, and the people that are doing their part, and the people that are trying to advance it in the right ways, we need to start being more open-minded as well to both sides, because the problem lies that one side feels one way, other side feels another way, and through discussion nothing is resolved. So either we just let it go and we move on, which is my prescription. Let it go and be the good, be the leader that you want to see in this community, because I personally live by this rule, and that's why I don't get involved in these shuffle dramas anymore, is
Mm-hmm.
because I lead by example, and I lead by the leader I want to see in the community. I try and be that person and inspire more people to be that person, because If we're so focused on what's wrong, we can't make things right. If we're so focused on things that are just not changing and people who are not opening their mindset, then we need to move on from those people and we need to find the people who are doing the right things for shuffling and who have the open mindset and who are bringing this correct mindset and this appropriate ideology and this respect for all shuffle styles, because the people who are going to keep screaming about cutting shapes not being shuffling and the people who are going to continue teaching things wrong, many of them have said that they're not going to stop doing that. So why are we dwelling on it? Why don't we just decide to move forward? And if we don't like what somebody is doing, you have the opportunity to disengage. You don't have to follow that person. You don't have to take their classes. You don't have to involve yourself if you know that what they're teaching or their emphasis is truly for selfish gains. And shift your focus to people who are doing the right things for shuffling. The problem is, as a newcomer to the community, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
It's hard to understand these things. And we can't, make blasts on social media about particular people or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's
This
just it's bringing it back, right? It's
you're
not.
entering their game.
Yeah, exactly. So how it's going to happen, I think that the correct people will find their way for sure. Sorry, that's my. I've got a class in half an hour. I'm just going to let you know, so that way we have like
No,
a time
I
frame.
also have to join a class in bit time in short time, so
Okay, perfect. So
so it's all right. And I also think, well, students of mine told me exactly what you told us right now, that when they come in, they just see like viral videos or people who's got a big social media page, and like this is the probably the first people they see. But as when they start to go more in deep and on what shuffling is, they start to find the different styles. Okay, they start to find more people who's OG, people who is teaching, people who is doing events, who is like doing the professional culture part. They start to see that these people is really the ones that have like the good knowledge to learn from, and this like the most experienced people of that will make you learn the better, the better way than
aren't just
maybe the other. It's not that,
personal.
yeah, it's not that the other person won't can't teach you anything. It's just there is some people who focuses more in the professional part of the culture. Maybe people as you and people like me or Shuflis or Mark, or there's a lot of people around the world doing this part. And these people, they don't always have the biggest follower base, but we need to also acknowledge that these people who is having a huge engagement in their accounts, they're bringing a lot of people to our community. And and if this person, it doesn't matter if it's just one person, if this one is really interested in shuffling, and they will end up finding someone. It could be you, it could be Mark, it could be Finn in Russia, it could be Boombox in LA, in California. I don't know, whichever teacher they end up learning from. Like, people who always brings more people to the community, this is always a great labor for the community. But I also don't like that if they also sell themselves as like the culture promoters or these kind of things. Like, yeah, they're drawing a lot of attention and a lot of people into shuffling, but for for really teaching the culture properly, like it's been a long, it's been a long path, at least for me, and also for you, for the things you're saying, to get to this point of really understanding what is going on with shuffling and having the right, or what we think today as right, as the right knowledge and the right teaching that people needs to learn for really getting to shuffling. So I think that everybody should do what they believe in. I think there's nothing bad. If you don't resonate with someone, then, as you said, don't follow this person, or don't book their classes. But we also need to acknowledge really where we are and what is the work that we are really doing. Because I know that in my case, I'm really working on the professional side of shuffling, and I know that maybe it's slower because maybe I don't have this huge ultra mega high engage in the social medias, but I know that people who really wants to learn shuffle professionally and really have like a an experienced approach, maybe these people will end up coming to me or to you or to people like us who has this approach. So I think it's just a matter of preferences of the people who is into shuffling. I think that if someone takes, I don't know, let's say, because right now, for example, I think now she's not doing classes, but Banseko was doing classes some months ago. I think right now she's not doing them because the group she doesn't have the time. But there was a lot of people taking their classes, and I saw people complaining about that. But people complain they don't know why are they taking these classes. Maybe they just really want to learn this choreography. So what bad and is that people, maybe someone just wants to do the choreography, maybe this person likes the choreography, and then they want to learn more about shuffling, and maybe they see, okay, I like this choreography, but I want to learn the Kali style, and maybe Banseko is not that super experienced in Kali style, and maybe they find Gili or they find Boombox, for example, who are I think really more experienced dancers in Kali style. So there's people that will just want to learn choreographies, and there's people who will just end up want just to learn the professional side of the shuffling, like really go into the shuffle developing. So
Agreed. Even if we look at, for example, the dance world and open classes, when I used to go take open classes, especially with particular choreographers, I was going just to learn their choreography, learn a specific creative sense of movement that they are providing. And so many people are inspired by particular dancers, and Van Secco is obviously a good example of this because she puts out a specific way of dancing. She has a particular type of choreography. Other people like Mary Grace, for
yeah.
example, are they're all advancing through teaching personal creative choreographies, which are so essential to other people who want to dance like them, right? So I don't think it's wrong that people are taking the more creative approach and just wanting to teach choreography and showcase the performing aspect of shuffling and how people can learn different choreographies as well. I think that having a multitude of teachers means that you have access to lots of different ways of dancing. And like you said, there's always a way to find, who's teaching professionally what you are wanting to learn, whether it be Cali, Moz style,
Hmm.
Melbourne, cutting shapes. As long as you're introduced to shuffling in some sense, if you are willing to explore, which most people who are actually invested in shuffling because they love it they tend to go and actually research and learn more and follow new people. Some people are in it for the trend component as well. And who are we to judge them for that? Maybe they just want to do, a few dances here and there they can post on their TikTok
Hmm.
and they enjoy that. So as long as what you're doing is authentic and it's going to make you happy, then it shouldn't matter what other people are saying. And I think that we should continue to support all instructors in whatever means or whatever sense that they are teaching, as long as they are not bringing down the rest of the community as well, right? Because we don't want people who are instructing and providing a negative mindset to the community, right? So that is one thing I will say that, if we see that, then it's more important to distinguish that, maybe these people don't have the right mentality or they're not teaching, the correct way so that we can be respectful of all styles. So I think ultimately, like, there's no harm in taking a choreography class or just learning a choreography because that is how most dance styles evolve, right? Like open classes is a big part of every single dance genre. So it's going to be a key part of shuffling, whether people like that or not. And yes, shuffling was born from freestyle, but that does not mean that we cannot create choreography and teach that to other people who want to understand our creative process. Because the way I freestyle, how can I truly show someone exactly how I freestyle unless I put together a combo or a series so that they can understand my transitions, my technique, how my structure is with the way I freestyle. How can I how can I truly explain that to someone without showing them a piece together pattern, whether it be a combo, a full choreography? How can I truly express and share that with somebody unless I actually create a choreography? So I don't think we should bash choreographers versus freestyle dancers either. I think that there is equal benefit to understanding both and learning how to do both. You're also building a different type of coordination with learning choreography, a different type of mind to body muscle memory and quick thinking and quick memory with movement as well, which is super helpful for freestyle as well. Because when you build that into your choreography and your repetition becomes not just one move, but a series of moves, there's better chance of you executing that in freestyle as well. So I think that there is a huge benefit to learning choreography. There's a reason why other dance styles include this within their classes, is because it's beneficial to the dancer as well.
Yeah, there's if you want to learn some specific move, you need to teach the move directly. But when it comes to this freestyle and how do you achieve some freestyle things, I think it's possible to learn that, but it's a very complex uh, mission because there's a lot of things that are happening in the same time. And if the dancer has been dancing for a long time, there's a lot of things that this dancer has already internalized and they don't think about them. They just perform it, and maybe the student, maybe they have to need to have in mind six different things at the same time in order to perform this step. But because you have it internalized and have done it, and have done it, scale it, like first this, then the other thing, then the other thing throughout the years, like you don't think about when performing this. So is it really, it's super complex to achieve some things, but there's always a way. It doesn't matter if it's maybe with choreography help or freestyle help. So last topic of the podcast. So because we're running out of time, it's been so great. So it's a very interesting podcast, this one. So let's talk about a little bit of your business, which is Shuffluence, and I'm going to pack everything up with, let's talk about the Shuffluence event that you were going to have in, I think it was in May from last year. I think
Yes, yeah.
May, April, because Mark was going there, and I know about the event because Mark was going, and you also had to come to Spain to the Showcase League, and the
Oh,
pandemic in Spain hit the week before we were locked down here in Spain. So
I was upset.
yeah, us too. So we're like, we had everything prepared for this. It was just 1 week left, so it was a huge disappointment. But anyways, we have to live with it right now and wait for the next event to happen. So why do you think is this important for the community to organize these events? Because you were going to attend to this competition in Barcelona, but you were also organizing and hosting your own events and workshops in Toronto. So why is this important for you, and why people should attend to these presential in-person events?
Well, I think the main goal for having, because what we were doing was an expo specifically, so it was going to be a series of workshops from different teachers within the global community, which is, such an essential part of learning, is getting different perspectives on shuffling and the different styles that occur within that. So we had people who were going to be teaching all different areas of shuffling. Mark was one of them. We also had Gabby David coming as well. And then we also had Tyler Dern. She was going to be doing an emphasis on Cali and Melbourne Shuffle so that we had a very well rounded approach to what we were going to be offering.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the key thing that we were trying to do is when you get a ton of people together in a room and they're all learning a specific method and they're all engaging and conversing, we're able to advance the shuffle community in a fast-tracked way because people are together, people are able to discuss, learn, share, right? Sharing is such a key part of this community, and the growth of this community is those who are willing to share and to help advance, our understanding of topics and concepts within the community. So I think that, shuffle events in general are essential. Competitions as well, as you said, are so helpful because it shows the dancer that what they're capable of learning and what others are capable of demonstrating, and how far along they can go in this shuffling journey and pick up so many more new styles. And I think what we truly were trying to do was create an atmosphere for learning that was very open, very judgment free, a place where people could come and learn from their idols within the shuffle community. Because let me tell you, the people that bought tickets were like absolutely losing their minds that everyone was going to be together in one room. Some of the people they were watching for years and years, because we have, quite a big shuffling community here in Canada. People were ecstatic to be able to learn and speak to those idols in person and have their perspective and to be able to utilize that on their journey. And I think that events like this are so essential to the community becoming more professional and advancing in ways that we can grow and develop the community in the best way possible. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that, having them in different areas of the world is even better because you get to travel and experience the culture, not just within the shuffle community, but the actual community that you're going to be entering into. I know when I went to Spain, it was such a difference in culture than from here in Canada, and it was such a beautiful thing to experience. So having that alongside the shuffling community and learning from the shufflers in each different place of the world or different locations, it just provides a new perspective, a new outlook, a different way to see things. I know when I met Mark, it was super helpful for me on my journey as both an instructor and as just a dancer in general because we were able to exchange knowledge. And I had questions for him, he had questions for me. It was just a very beautiful experience to be able to share that. And I realized, I've done that with so many different shufflers, and it's been so beneficial to my process that I realized more people need access to this through events, through organized events, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my wonderful partner, Candice, was the one who approached me with the idea, so I can't take credit for it, but she just had the same mentality about shuffling. And she was fairly new in her shuffle journey. So it was beautiful that she had these same realizations that there wasn't a local place to just go and gain perspectives on a bunch of different areas of shuffling, right? So for her, it was essential to her journey, seeing that opportunity and that not existing yet. It was perfect. It was nice symmetry to have us both together, me being a very experienced instructor in the industry and someone who has met a lot of these key shufflers of the evolution of shuffling.
Mm-hmm.
So together we decided to host this event. It was definitely a lot of planning that went into it, and we were very sad when we had to postpone it. It is still under postponement because Canada and Ontario specifically is still under lockdown. So
Mm-hmm.
bringing people into the country would be definitely very hard this year. So we're aiming to have it probably early next year, 2022, willing everything kind of opens up and we're
Yeah.
able to bring in the instructors. But I think it's just an essential part of our community is having these events brings people together for the right reasons and helps us advance the community in the right ways.
Let's hope for the best to see if the 22 beginnings are a little bit more hopeful and open literally open open countries, so we can travel around and go to other countries events. So it's
Because
been
to coming to Spain too,
yeah.
it was so exciting for me to be able to come
Yeah,
in and share
and
your
you would have loved this competition because it's like I don't know. I talk about the competitions I've seen. I also have been in Russia in competitions, in international competitions, and
yeah, yeah.
like the atmosphere in the in Spain in this Spain's tournament in the Showcase League, it's it's amazing. It's not because I'm from here, but also people from outside from Spain, like Lost Boy, Fogchild also came to the event, and they always come from Russia because they also like the event. So it's like a place where the atmosphere is just like good vibes, sharing and love and hype for everyone. So all the dancers that participate, it doesn't matter if they lose first round or last round in the finals, they always get like a really good experience and they're looking forward to come back. So I was also very sad, so it couldn't happen. But I also think that when it happens, it will be the craziest competition ever. Not because, as I said, not because just the competition, but because it's a moment where all the people meets in the same place. Dancers from all around Spain, from other European countries, which were also coming, and little by little, more people from other countries is going to come. So I think it ends up being a really good event, and I hope your event it also ends up because this is about doing an edition after edition after edition, and I always say that people who start big events now, in the future, they're going to be the biggest events worldwide because they have started when there's no events, and if they take it really professional, these events are going to make a change because people will keep going to these professional events, and
Exactly.
and
And
long term thinking. Yeah, yeah. What were you saying?
I was saying you'll get people out of the country too, as well,
Yeah,
that are going to be coming as well, and
yeah.
it's just going to get bigger and bigger.
So if you want to start hosting a tournament, this is the moment because there's not many tournaments or events, live events happening. So it's a good moment to start them and get experience and feedback from the people who is coming and see what things can you improve in order to have really huge events in the future because these events are going to happen. So don't think it's just some niche thing about just shuffling. It's going to get so much bigger. It's been great
Sure.
having you here. The last thing about the podcast is I ask you two things. The first one is something that you have learned lately, maybe in the last month, something about shuffling, maybe a DJ that you love their sound, something to share with the Shuffle podcast listeners who can learn some tip or have some advice from shuffling that you have recently learned in the last months.
I would say over the last year specifically, I think, having a lot of time to ourselves and thinking about how we address conflict and how we address difference of opinion. I think over the last year within the shuffling community, I know this isn't specifically pertaining to, a specific move, but something that I've personally picked up is the realization that as long as other people are being authentic and representing their authentic selves and showing up for themselves, we don't need to judge them or, say that their opinion is wrong and our opinion is right. And within this community, I think the number one thing that we can learn together from all sides and all angles is that there's no right opinion and there's no wrong opinion, and that everyone is valid as long as they are being their authentic selves and that they're showing love for themselves and everyone else around them. And I think this is something that I've learned specifically over the course of the last year in having a lot of time to myself and doing specifically inner work and just really thinking about the ways in which I address not only, myself but others around me. And I think as a global community, a lot of people are waking up to this realization that we need to be more accepting, we need to be more open-minded, we need to be less opinionated and proving right and wrong, and more willing to discuss others' opinions and find new ways and new I guess, solutions to problems that have existed for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a community, this is the number one sense of advice I want to give and that I want to share with others, is that the more we can be open-minded to the perspectives of everyone in the shuffle community and not just one particular person or, a particular group of people, the more we can be willing to create unity and to create a new path forward together that is not in conflict 24/7. Because I just want to see the shuffle community in some way unified so that there's not this continued conflict forever. And we'll be able to achieve so much more together for coming generations if we're able to resolve these issues and stop pointing the finger. So I think that my number one piece of advice is think before you speak, think before you judge others, and especially if you're doing this publicly, and just truly think about why something is bothering you and find a way to put the good out into the world that you want to see, especially in this shuffling community, because it's something I've learned over the last year or so. And I think that the more we can have this mentality towards the shuffle community, the better we'll be able to move forward with unity and respect for each other, which is so essential for our growth.
Yeah, this is an incredible advice for everyone, because I just see that people who is always talking without thinking much or being very aggressive into one person, because this person, because they want to say that. In my case, when I see this, they lose my respect, and I don't think anyone wants to lose the respect, and even more of people who is taking the shuffle really seriously and trying it to do it professionally. So I think that if you lose the respect of these people, you are doing something really wrong, and I'm not someone who is hating any side of the shapes or the Melbourne or the charging or not charging for classes. I'm just really open and really willing to make the shuffle movement very professional and grow it. So if I lose respect for someone, I think that this person is doing something really, really bad and really unhealthy for the shuffle community. So I'm not a big hater, but when I see I don't like some kind of, I don't know the word right now. I forgot the word in English. Spanish speakers problem. It's okay. The word was behavior. When some people has this behavior, it stops resonating, at least with me, and I don't take this person as a someone important. So it each time they talk and say something like that, they lose this respect and credibility for me. So I won't be taking into account these people's opinion very often. Maybe I can hear them if they put it together and in good manners, but having bad manners, I think this leads nowhere. Okay.
Exactly. It
And
helps to have trust in the people that you are, supporting. And when you lose that sense of respect for them, you also don't trust and don't feel that they're credible any longer for what they're preaching. Because when we see people preaching a negative attitude and a negative outlook on things, that's not helping anybody in any way, right? By just,
yeah.
speaking in this manner.
And the second question is that I've been on the podcast making you questions, so you get to ask me one question for ending the podcast. So whatever you want to ask me, up to you.
Oh, I wish I had prepared because I would totally have thought about this. But I guess my question to you is, how do you think that we should proceed with, the issues that have been arising over and over again from a perspective of someone coming from a community that has already resolved these issues? Like, what is your prescription to the conflict? In like a general sense, obviously, because I know very deep
So
question.
so what I think is that we should look as the, like, some people talks about specific styles as a way of like freedom of expressing themselves, and that for me is not just about shuffling, it's just about dancing in general. So this is what dancing, it's what I feel when dancing, is that whatever I want to say and express into my moves, I can do it. So in start like having problems because you're doing some little move different, and this, like when I started to see the shapes versus Melbourne or general shuffle issue, I was like, man, this is just a running man done a different way. Like why there is, where, why this is leading to a this huge problem. Like for me it didn't make any sense. So throughout the last years I also been very interested in, also in personal development. So this helped me really much to avoid a lot of dramas in personal life and in shuffling. So I was always looking to the why of the things that were happening and to tackle the really, like the real problem. The problem is not that the movements are different. The problem is what the approach of the people is. So I started to step up a little bit and start being a leader, I would say. And now I am a leader of the Spanish community, and I want to make a point here because a leader is not someone who wants to have the voice and want to say to people what they have to say. This for me is like a boss, like a people who likes to say people what they need to do. But a leader for me is someone that has a vision and they just trust in this vision and they do things that go aligned with this vision and they inspire other people, and there's people that believe in these people and their mission and they start to follow this. So I think this is what started to happen here in Spain. Like Shuflis and then and there was more people in the Shuffle Showcase and in Barcelona, but we weren't forcing other people to think the same that us. We just believed that this was the right message and the right approach to the shuffling and to resolve any issues. Like we had no issues. The dramas were from other people, most of them. So when people were starting to see that our approach was with no hate, no drama, no nothing, people were starting to embrace this approach too. So I would encourage people who really believes in their mission and in their vision. Don't don't create dramas. Don't say nothing to anyone, even if it's different than what you think. Just believe in yourself and what we said before, work on this way, on this vision. So when you
Yeah.
work and you put the hours in, the work will speak for itself. And then if people really believes in what you're doing, they're going to follow you and embrace this vision too. If not, they're just seeing you as a toxic person. So I think this is what ended up helping here in Spain, to see people that was having a really great time in shuffling with no hates, with no dramas, and people wanting to embrace this vision. So I think this is what really worked for us.
For sure. Just being the change that you wanted to see and expressing that through your vision and your path, and having other people just join in that and realizing that this is the way to move forward.
Yeah.
So I love that. That's a great approach for sure. It's
So
basically my similar approach here in Canada, and hopefully to be able to spread that worldwide as well.
So it's been great talking with you. It's been more than 2 hours, so really long podcast. I hope all the listeners loved this episode in particular. I really think that we talked many things and with an approach more professional, because Rebel is putting her full time into shuffling. So it's been great having you, and I'm going to let you end the podcast. So whatever you want to say to the audience, the mic is all yours.
I just wanted to thank you so much for having me on this, and for all that you're doing for the community as well, because people like you are spreading the right message and helping the right voices be heard. And I think that's so important to celebrate as well, that our community is diverse and there's so many voices within it. And it's important that we share the right messages and that we don't speak over each other, but we listen to each other, and that we be the change that we want to see. I know I say this so often, but if you don't want the drama, then don't be the drama. Don't share things that are negative. Don't say things that are hurtful and that aren't going to do any good for this community. Instead, say things in a positive manner, and think about what you say before you put it all over social media, because at the end of the day, we need to support each other. We need to support this movement. And the only way we're going to do that is when we respect one another, and our own individual opinions about things are always going to be different, but it's about listening rather than speaking over each other, and just listening to all the different messages, and really trying to figure out a way that we can move forward in unity with the correct vision. And I think that you guys do a great job of that. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm so happy that we can share the right messages here, and talk about our vision for the future of shuffling. And I hope that other people pay mind to this and really think about, if they're an educator, if they're in this community, what they're contributing and how they can spread their message in a positive and respectful way.
So thank you for listening. You will find Rebel social media in the description, so you can find her in Instagram. You also can take his classes if you want to learn from her. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.